Okay, so this is day 3 of our qRules training, and it's our last day. And today we're going to look at Termsets first, and then we're going to do Encrypt Decrypt. Like I said yesterday, it was almost split down the middle as to what people wanted to do. And looking at the content that we had for today, I think we can fit both in. So I think we should do both, and that way everybody gets to try these different things. And especially since Termsets is kind of it's kind of complex, and so it's kind of like Save to SharePoint. It's sort of nice to give it a try in an environment that first off is an honest-to-goodness dev environment, not your own personal production SharePoint site. I tend to feel a lot better about trying new things in something that I know is a dev or a test environment. And also it gives us a chance to ask questions then as we have them. So a term is a word or a phrase, and these definitions are from MSDN, because I find the whole concept of term sets to be kind of confusing myself, and it takes me a few rereadings to get back in the swing of them every time. So a term is a word or a phrase that can be associated with an item in SharePoint. You know, when we're looking at objects on our desk, we all know what a stapler refers to, right? It's a common term that we all use. We know what the object is that we're talking about when we say stapler, okay? And so a term is a word that refers to an item that happens to be in SharePoint. A term set is a collection of related terms. That's easy enough. Managed metadata refers to the fact that the terms in the term sets can be created and managed independently from the column. So these things are loosely coupled. They're not tightly bound. So we can manage our terms and our term sets without having to go into each column and change things. Okay? Local term sets are site collection specific. Those get created for a site collection. Global term sets are outside of the site collection and applies to all of the site collections. Okay, and the last is my little soapbox point. Data is only valuable when it's consistent. I know every single one of you has worked in your lifetime with probably a free-form customer name field or a free-form address field, and so in one instance it's John Smith, where somebody's typed in S-M-I-T-H, and in the other instance somebody's accidentally spelled it Smythe, you know, S-M-Y-T-H-E, and in the third instance they spelled John without the H. And now you're trying to do some reporting and collate this data, and you can't, right? You can't put these together because they don't match any longer. So the concept of managed metadata, it's helpful for me to think of it in terms of the same kind of structure we build in InfoPath when we create things like drop-downs, and we say, oh, no, you can't type in your own value here. You have to select one of mine. And obviously that's restrictive to users in some scenarios, but at the same point in time it allows us to at least amass data in a consistent fashion, which allows us to report on it and allows us to join things together, something we can't really do if our data is a disaster. So in order to have a term set, in order to modify them and add them, you have to be a term store administrator. They're managed via the term store management tool. I'm just tossing these terms out here. I'm just tossing these terms out here. We're going to look at this in a second. We'll walk through it. And if you're using qRules to work with your term sets to get them, you need to inject your form correctly. There's a little checkbox in the injector for including the term set APIs. And what this does is this adds an additional data connection to your form that qRules uses as a placeholder to store the data returned from the term sets. There's no native InfoPath there's no native SharePoint web service that returns term set information nicely to InfoPath. Okay, so speaking of SharePoint web services, you probably have run across the occasion where you've wanted to try to use SharePoint's native web services in InfoPath, and you may have also, as I have been somewhat surprised by the fact that not all of them will generate a schema that is friendly to InfoPath. And the best thing I've found is just read the documentation on MSDN and then just try to create a data connection to the web service in question and see if InfoPath can generate a schema. I've had about a 50% success rate over my career with that. So we're going to take a look at some of these things. We're going to look at the term store management tool, and we're going to look at adding term sets to a library. And I'm going to go ahead and just drag my little Internet Explorer window over here, and I'm going to pop over to this guy. And actually, let's go ahead and let's navigate to this. Pop open Word. Okay, so to get here, we start, let's go ahead and start just at our site level. And you may or may not have a SharePoint admin, you may or may not have this kind of access to your site, but I think it's helpful to at least see it so you know what it looks like. So we go from Site Actions to Site Settings. And in Site Settings, we've got Site Administration. From here, we go to Term Store Management. Okay? And so here's our term store, and here are all of the terms that have been set up. Okay, so now we go ahead and we're going to add a new group. I don't know if we do a drop-down. We do a drop-down and new group. Okay, and we're going to give it a name. I'm going to name it qDabra so that you guys can use this in the lab. Okay, and so now we've got it, and we're going to add a description. Oh, we're going to spell it right. And I'm probably not going to add any managers or add any contributors, because you don't have to be a manager or a contributor to read them. These are people who have permissions to edit terms and term set hierarchies within the group. So you can make your permissions here pretty granular. I could imagine you might have some term sets for a particular thing, and you would want your R&D team to be able to contribute to them, or you would want your marketing team to be able to contribute to them, but you don't want the HR team to be able to get in there and make a mess, or heaven forbid the accountants, right? You know what I'm saying? You've got certain people who you want to have be able to manage a particular set of terms, and this is what that allows you to do. So now we're going to create a new term set here underneath this guy. Whoops. We're not going to click it wrong. We're going to click the drop down. Ah, I see what it's telling me. It's telling me to click the Save button. I just had to read the message a few times. Okay, so now we've saved. Now we click the drop down, and we're going to do a new term set. And this one is going to be named Products as per our training. And we're going to tab. And then now we're going to create a term. So our term set is Products. Okay, and our group is qDabra, our term set is Products, and from here we should be able to create a term. So our first terms we're going to create, and I'm just going to add a few things. Wait, what have you done here? Where is my new term? Let's try again. Create term. I'm waiting to see if it's going to behave. I see a flashing cursor and a blank thing above it. I'm going to go ahead and just try typing something in. Okay, and I did do a terrible job of spelling that. Sorry guys, I'm having some technical difficulties apparently. Let's see if we can edit it. Okay, I'm not allowed to change the label. I'm going to go ahead and add another one and see if it behaves a little better. Create term. Isn't that interesting? I'm wondering if this is an IE issue. And anyway, you should be able to see what you're typing. This should not be quite as, I'll take that guy. This should not be quite as messy as it's looking. We'll create another term, and I'm going to spell it right this time. Oh, it doesn't mind if it's all capitals. And let's make up another product. Okay, so this is a little wacky, but it looks like we've got a few created. See if it lets me change that. Oh, now it does. Okay, we're going to do that. So our terms are kind of nonsensy, but at least we've got some. And you can create items underneath here as well, and I'm going to go ahead and do that. 2.5, 2.6, because I think you're going to need some nested things for the training when we go through that. There we go. That's a little better. And under qRules, let's see if we can create anything underneath that. And at this point, I'm just hitting enter, and it's letting me enter new ones. So it appears to just be having a little issue with the very top level. Let's create a few new things under this too. So, you know, you can see how the data standardization here would help. I mean, forcing everybody to select a version of qRules instead of entering their own. Make sure that they enter the version correctly. 2.3, there we go. So now we've got a few things in here that are hierarchical. And I'm going to go ahead and add, I'm going to add a couple things here. Trial and full. Okay, I think we've got enough nested here that it'll give you something to work with when you do your lab. So now we've created our term set. In order to use it in Get Term Sets, we need to make sure that we've got them added to our site. And so in this case, we're going to just add them to our Shared Documents library. I created a library called Shared Documents. I just uploaded some files there. There are training module files, and we're going to add a column. Okay, so here we go. And I'm going to name this like we have it in our lab. I'm going to name it Managed Data. Okay, and I'm going to mark that it's a Managed Metadata column. Okay, earlier versions of client, here we go with the error messages. And I am one of those people who reads directions when she buys something, and I read error messages when I see them. And the reason is it often turns out that they have valuable information that can help me. Usually these kinds of messages are not meant as just a CYA, right? There's an actual value to them. And in this case, it's just saying that, look, you know, if you've got other things that are saving to this document library, there's a chance that adding this column could cause you a problem with some third-party thing or some internal tool that your devs built, or just don't be assured that this is all going to work out well for you, is what this is basically saying. So be aware if you go add a managed metadata column and you've got a bunch of other stuff going on, you've got some third-party stuff included in your SharePoint site, you've got some magic workflow from somebody down the street that's doing amazing things, just be aware and test your stuff after you add this. Best case scenario, have a test version of your library that has all your stuff set up on it, right? And so just, you know, be aware. Okay, so we're going to do managed metadata, and under our term set settings, right, we get down here and we go ahead and we're going to navigate to products. I believe, I hope we are. Right, and here we go, and we're going to set it. I'm going to select that guy, and set into the field. We're going to enter the name of the term set here. Let's see if I've got this right. And let's say OK. You can tell I've used these a lot, can't you? And now let's go ahead and we're going to edit the properties. And let's make sure we can pick a term. There we go. This is what we were hoping to see, right? We're going to say that this is qRules. We're going to do 4.2 trial just because we'll do full too. Oh, we'll only do trial, because I don't think I set it to allow multiple options. Okay, and so I'll go ahead and save this. So now we have a managed data column with something in it. You can feel free to add additional items there if you want, but the real point is that we needed to have a column somewhere in our site that was using this in order for us to be able to do the lab. So without further ado, let's pop back over here to our slides. We've got this set up. This is the first part of the lab. You'll find it in the first part of the documents, and so you can start on page 5, step 9. Now, because we're doing because we're going to do both the encryption lab and the Termsets lab, if you go in your Lab 7 folder, you can see we've got two folders, one for encryption and one for Termsets. So the Termsets lab is, not surprisingly, in the Termsets folder. It is a little complex. Let's plan on working on it until about, let's say, 10 to 10. Why don't you work on this until 10 to 10? Again, as I've said before, site's going to be up for a while, so if you want to go back and finish something up later, that's going to be available to you. But if we do till 10 to 10, then we'll have plenty of time to make sure we get through encryption and all of our other things. I'll be here if you've got questions. I'll paves. I'm so glad it's Thursday. I'm going to pause sharing and stop recording, and we'll get back together at 10 to 10. Okay, well, hopefully everybody had a chance to get through the Termsets lab. And again, if you have questions or if you get stuck or have any difficulties with the lab, do let me know. And I'm happy to give you a hand, and can always hop in and take a look at your form during the next lab, okay? So next we're going to talk about Encrypt and Decrypt. Let me see. Oh, I've got that on the next slide. You know what? I don't like the order of these slides. We're going to talk about this slide first. So the encryption security. qRules uses a 256-bit name I can't pronounce algorithm to encrypt the data and stores it as a base 64 string. It's an AES algorithm. And here's a link that tells you a little bit more about that particular standard. So we are using an encryption standard. The class is something that is included in the .NET libraries, the same classes that Windows uses and Microsoft Tools use. So it is an encryption standard that we're using. So we don't save or cache your password. So when the user types their password into the field that you've indicated is going to be for their password, it's not saved. We encrypt this stuff, and you can't decrypt it without that password, okay? Because that's part of the encryption algorithm. It takes the password, makes a hash of it, and that's part of this encryption process. From there, the encrypted data is converted to base 64. To store it as a string. So it's encrypted and then stored as base 64. You don't want to save passwords in the main data source. We don't internally when we use this, when we use encrypt and decrypt, and we do use it internally for a couple of different things. I'll tell you about those. Internally when we use this, we don't store passwords at all. They don't get stored in the XML. Each person who uses a password for something, they need to be keeping track of it. The two places that I know of that we're currently using encryption is we use it in one particular form where we often store legal documents, and so sometimes we have legal documents that are sensitive, and rather than, and mind you, since these are attached as documents, they're already saved as base 64 in the XML, but while for your standard user, opening up that XML and looking at the base 64 would be adequate to prevent them from going any further. The fact remains that base 64 could be directly decrypted and provide you with a file, right? And so encrypting it and then restoring it as base 64 again means that even if the base 64 is decrypted, you still have an encryption algorithm there. You still have encrypted data that would have to be decrypted in order to be able to be converted back to a file. Okay, so we use it for that. We use it for legal documents. The other thing we use it for is for licensing keys for DBXL. So each version of DBXL gets a new licensing key. Old licenses won't work with new version. And in order to create these licenses, you have to have a password that will decrypt the license keys. And so there's a couple of folks on the team that have the ability to create licenses, and those folks have this password that decrypts the keys that are then used to create the DBXL licenses. So those are two places where we currently use encrypt and decrypt within our internal forms and our internal processes. So again, don't save passwords in the main data source. That's, we all know that. That's just bad planning. Generally speaking, don't show passwords when typing. Now that means you can use white on white. White text on a white background does pretty well. We'll look at that in the demo. When you highlight that white text on a white background, though, it does show you what's being typed. You can use an obscuring font, something like Wingdings, for example. Keep in mind that with an obscuring font, I believe if we copy it out and we paste it in a text editor, I think you're going to get the actual characters there. So, there's going to have to be a certain level of just user security, users being smart. You know what I mean? You don't leave your machine open with a password typed in someplace where somebody can come by and copy it out and paste it into Notepad. There's only so much we can do in reality with things of this nature, but you get what I mean. And turn off autocomplete, because even if you're using a white font on a white background or you're using an obscuring font, and by the way, in this lab we include an obscuring font that's a true type font. I created it with some little tool on the web, and it's just a big bunch of round dots. And so that's something you can have your users install on their machines, and then you've got a dot font that kind of covers up what password characters are being entered. But if autocomplete is on, then it's still going to drop down showing you the actual characters that have been typed in the past. Now, the encrypt command includes a parameter that's clear. And you have an option of setting clear to no. The default is yes. And we would recommend that you not set it to no unless you're doing some testing, because what clear does is it empties that password field after the encryption or decryption has taken place, because you don't really want to have to count on the user to clear that field. You don't want to count on form logic to clear that field. Here we are back at our link again. Okay, so here's what the data looks like, right? Right here, we can see in field 1, it's a good old base 64. And let's go walk through this. Now, some things about this command. You can use it, as I mentioned, you can use it on files. Drag this over here. You can use it on files, but Encrypt places that string back in the same field that you requested the encryption on. So, if your field is a file attachment control, you attach your file, and then what happens, you run the encrypt command, encrypts the data, and then it saves it as a base 64 string back to that file attachment control. We found, when InfoPath 2010 came out, we found that about, I want to say 25 to 30% of the time, that caused a validation error. The base 64 that had been encrypted and is then reinserted into that file attachment control field caused a validation error. So keep it in mind. Some workarounds are things like then copying the encrypted string from that field into a plain text field and deleting it from that file attachment field. That way you aren't storing the encrypted string in the file attachment field, and then you can give your user an option to decrypt, and you can copy it from your your placeholder field back over. So there's some workarounds for that. It's just something to be aware of. You can always use clear errors too, but man, I'm so cautious with clear errors. I'm so concerned that I'm going to clear errors that I need to protect my form from users who are not going to enter entirely complete data. So with this one, this little demo form here, I've actually broken all of my own rules, because this is going to be plain text and have autocomplete turned on, so you'll see what some of the problems are there. So here's my data. Let me pop open Notepad, because I've got my commands already written up so that I can just copy and paste them. So here's my data, and now for my password, you can see this is what I used before, was ABC123, and with this autocomplete turned on, it's not too pretty because I've got it right there. So let's encrypt. And so here's our encrypt command. So we're going to do encrypt. Here's the XPath to the field that I'm going to encrypt, field 1. And here's the XPath to my password, field 2. And here is clear equals no. I'm not going to clear it. I'm going to leave that password in. Right? And so you can see here's my base 64 encrypted data. Now let's mess up and mistype our password. And let me copy my decrypt command, which looks exactly like my encrypt command, only starts with decrypt. Really tricky stuff, right? Okay, same stuff. And I'll tab out. Failed to decrypt. Check your password and make sure the field was encrypted by qRules and retry. Okay, so we'll get rid of that 3 there. And here we go again. Let's try again. Okay, and so now we've decrypted correctly. So let's take a look at some of our options here. First off, let's change this text box. No, we don't want to enable autocomplete. And let's not enable spell checker either, because that's really annoying. We want users to use appropriately strong passwords, and you could do that with data validation too if you wanted to, right? You could add some data validation with a custom pattern requiring that they include at least one special character and one number and so on. You could enforce a strong password. I think that's kind of that would be kind of fun. We don't do anything like that in ours. my poor teammates, as I prepare myself now to go ahead and enforce strong passwords in all of our encryption stuff. So we're going to preview again, and because of my laziness, I'm going to go ahead and use that. Okay, so now I've used a Wingdings font, right? Now that's kind of nicely obscured. Let's see what happens if we copy it and we paste it over here in our little text editor, right? Okay, so obviously my text editor doesn't care about my special obscuring font. So that's just something to keep in mind. You're going to see that with any font. I don't think there's a font-related solution, right? You'd have to find some way to prevent copy, which I can't think of a way to do offhand in InfoPath. So there you've got it. And then we can go ahead and, again, we can encrypt. Now this time I'm not using the clear parameter, and if you don't use the clear parameter, the default is yes, so it blanks out your password. Okay, and that's a good thing. We want that. And then the last suggestion I've got here on passwords, and this is the one that we use in our licensing form, is we just simply set it to white on white. Now we're a virtual company. You know, most of us aren't working with anybody looking over our shoulder. So there's a certain level here that has to do with company culture, company security, how things are set up in your firm. If you're working in a place that's got a cube pit where you've got a bunch of, you know, halfway high cubicles and people are definitely in each other's space all the time, then security for password in terms of glancing over the screen and seeing somebody's password, I think becomes a lot more important. And I would be more likely to use an obscuring font, like even Wingdings, as dorky as it looks. At least you know everybody's got it on their machine. I'd be more likely to use an obscuring font in that scenario than I would be to use white on white. And here's why. This is what white on white looks like, right? We do our ABC 1, 2, 3. That looks all just fine. But I tab out and I tab back in, and it's highlighted in blue because right now that field is highlighted, and so you can see that very clearly. With an obscuring font in place, and better yet, you know, although it's hard for users if you obscure it and make it white. White is a little hard anyway because you don't always know how many characters you've typed in if you mess up, right? ABC 1, 2, 3. We'll tab out. We'll tab back. Oh, look at that. So that's fascinating. I must not have changed the font in the right thing. I did not. Okay, let's give this another try. There we go. I think I just typed in more characters than I meant to, but there we go. So with an obscuring font in white on white, you lose the goofy look of typing in Wingdings, but you do still have some protection if it gets highlighted when you need to not have it showing. At the same point in time, you know, so much depends on environment. The lab includes a dots font. Like I said, it's a true type font. You can install it on your machine, or let me just show that to you real quick. And you can install it on other machines. It was created with an open source font creation tool. In case somebody hasn't ever installed a font, we'll do this real quick, and then I'll set you loose on this lab. Okay, double click, right? And here's what it looks like. It's a bunch of dots, okay? it's 12, 14, and 18. Every single character is just a bunch of dots. You hit install, it'll install it. But again, this is a per machine thing. So you may have to do something to deploy it. I'm not a network or you know, kind of someone who's done much group deployment types of things, but I'm pretty sure, you know, there's ways to send things out to every machine on your network when you're in a big corp, and I would imagine there's probably a way to install a true type font over a network push of some kind. So now that we're installed, you know, qRules, I do not see him here. I probably have to restart this guy to find him. Let's do that real quick and see if he shows up now. And if he doesn't, then we'll move on, because I realize this is probably not that gripping for anyone but me. And there it is, right? So there's the font. It's all dots. We've set it to Q dots now. And if we, you know what, one more thing. Let's make it not white anymore, shall we? Let's go back to automatic, because if we're using a black obscuring font. So again, like the other obscuring fonts, if you copy it and paste it in the notepad, it's no longer obscured. And if your machine doesn't have the font installed, I'm not sure what it's going to switch to. That would be an interesting thing to test. You know, you've got a form that uses this font and then it's not installed on that machine. Definitely something you'd want to look into if you decided to use something that was a non-standard font for obscuring. At any rate, those are the potential security hazards that I can see straight off. You know, your greatest security with an InfoPath form is probably some of the built-in signing stuff, because that actually takes a snapshot of the form as it stands when it's signed and saves that as base 64 binary. You really can't mess with it. But at the same point in time, it doesn't obscure data that's in the XML, whereas this actually is going to make sure that data is encrypted and obscured. And I think between those two things, the fact that we encrypt and then we set it back as a base 64 string, I think it gives you some pretty good security within your XML. The downfall is users and passwords, right? There's no process here for your user to reset their password and save their data. If you don't have it right when you go and try to decrypt it, it's gone, and there's not a way to get it back. So there is that level of risk. I think, though, that that's a trade-off that we have to expect. The higher the security level on something, the greater the risk of loss if we don't have a way to unlock it. Because if you set up a methodology by which your users are able to store their passwords somewhere, let's say that you write some code so that they can submit something to a SQL database that has their passwords stored in it, and then you set up a method by which they can retrieve them. You know, the minute you've done that, if that password is in any place other than a user's head, you do run into the issue where a user has their password at risk, right? And so by pushing it to the user entirely, the risk is greater, the password and the data are safer. Okay, so those are just things you want to consider when you make the decision to encrypt your data. Is the idea that if your users aren't going to be able to manage these passwords, then they could lose their data, and you want to make sure that everybody understands the risk at hand, right? The reward is, of course, that data is safe. You know, our office manager has the password that she uses to lock up her legal documents. She could, if she chose, use a different password for every single legal document, and the rest of us do not know what those passwords are. Right, and so she has those legal documents locked down. We can't open them. We can't look at them. The form could be someplace that I could access it very easily. We don't have to worry about securing the form because the documents themselves have been secured. At any rate, we'll go ahead and move on to this next lab. This is the Encrypt Decrypt lab. It's 10:07. So I think we're going to go ahead, and this one includes an XTP. It's a little bit longer. So what I'd like to do is do lab until, I'm going to say 11:15. Yes, let's do lab till 11:15 because we've got one more lab and then one more little bit of information that I'm going to share at the end. Oh, and have I got a bug to show you? I ran into an InfoPath Forms services bug yesterday that I'm going to demo that for you at the end of this, because it was just crazed, and I want to show it to everybody who I can because it's insane. So 10:45 we'll start back up again. Okay, ask questions if you have them, and I'll go ahead and stop recording and pause and mute and all that stuff. Okay, so hopefully everybody had a chance to get through the encryption and decryption lab and understands how that works, and hopefully you'll have some places you can apply that in some of your forms that have sensitive data you'd like to protect. Now this is the last section that we're going to have a lab for. It's pretty quick, the lab is pretty quick, but the topic is reasonably important because it's on unique form names. And I know a lot of us use InfoPath with SharePoint. If you're using InfoPath with SharePoint, unique form names become pretty important because of overwrite issues. Now, you know when you set up a SharePoint library data connection, you have the option to select allowing overwrite. The things I see people have problems with there is they are using something for their form name in the little formula editor when you set up the data connection that is dynamic, and so they go ahead and check the box to allow overwrite, but they don't understand that for some reason their form name is changing every time they submit. A big problem that I see is when somebody uses, for example, now in a function to create the form name, and that is created in that formula editor inside the dialogues when you're creating the submit connection. Well, now is going to be different every time the form is submitted, isn't it? Now that could be super handy if you're trying to do some sort of versioning style thing without using the built-in versioning, or you want to be creating a new copy every time. I imagine without a workflow to clean up the old copies, that might be challenging for your users, but regardless, I'm not judging. You know, it's just, I'm just saying, dynamic names you need to be careful of. You want to make sure your name is not going to change on you as you submit if your intent is to overwrite. The other problem I frequently see is a static form name with overwrite not selected, and then confusion as to why the form won't save over the existing XML when the user submits. So those are some common issues. So generally speaking, we would say use a library set submit connection, set it to allow overwriting, and disable save in your forms. We usually don't use save at all, we just use submit, and that's because of being able to validate. We like being able to validate the data. Submit validates, save does not. You've got qRules, so you can do some homegrown validation by getting a count of errors in the form if you want to leave save enabled, and qRules has some methods for dealing with save as well, but those are for full trust forms and have to be used in filler. At any rate, use submit instead of save. Set your library connection to allow overwrites, and then make sure your name is truly unique and make sure it's stable. So make sure that whatever gets used for your initial submit, because we open up our template, we create a new XML, and at that point our template doesn't, our form, I'm sorry, our XML that we're filling out, it doesn't have a name right then, right? It's just brand new. It's never been saved. Data's never been saved. Thing doesn't have a name, right? Doesn't have a link. So when you create the name for the initial submit, make sure what you're using is something that's going to stay stable. Make sure it's not something that's going to get changed by other logic, so that each time that XML is reopened and saved, it overwrites its original. Now you can use generate GUID to throw a GUID onto your form name, or use a GUID as your form name. I love GUIDs as a developer because I know they're truly unique. I mean, the G stands for global, and so I know it's unique, but most users aren't so fond of the GUID. They feel that it is not human readable, which of course it's not, and nobody can reference it. They can't come to you and say, you know, form curly bracket ABCDE dash 123 dash, you know, they can't tell you what the problem is. They're unique though. If you use it, you can prevent overwrites by having that for your unique name. Accidental overwrites, which we're concerned about too, because if you have a form that could possibly have the same name as another form, you could have people accidentally overwriting each other's data. We don't want that. So you could promote columns to help your users identify, sort, and group. You could combine the GUID with other form information for a more meaningful name. So GUIDs are one option that we'll look at in the lab. And apparently I just stopped right there on the slides. Other options that you're going to look at in the lab include things like creating kind of a unique key. Now, one thing we use a lot internally for a unique key is a combination of username and the date and time, because I can't personally submit multiple forms at exactly the same time. So generally speaking, date and time makes a good unique key. And combined with my username, that's valuable and useful information. However, sometimes in forms you'll also find that there is a piece of unique information that you are only going to have one form for this particular setting, and therefore in that case you can use a field like that. The lab will cover a few different scenarios for you to try. It's not a terribly long lab, and since we've got some other stuff we're going to talk about still, including looking at my cool form services bug, and talking about best practices for browser forms. Why don't we go ahead and you guys can do that lab, and we will reconvene at, let's say, 11:15. Okay, so that'll give you 25 minutes, which should be plenty of time for this particular lab, and still gives us some time to discuss my bug and look at some best practices for browser forms and how browser forms are admin approved and all of those neat things. So I'll go ahead and pause everything. As always, if you have questions, just ask them. If you run into trouble, let me know.